Greetings, everyone. Thank you for coming today. When I made the announcement, I said we were going to start promptly at 1:30, so I want to hold to that so that we have plenty of time for our guest speaker today. I do want to start off with just a little housekeeping announcement. We passed out surveys last week. There is a basket in the back if you brought hard copies of that. You feel free to fill out a survey every week if you want, or hold on to them and just do one at the end, or randomly however you feel led. If you would like to fill those out online or email those, send those to Evan Manuel, and his email is in the directory. If you don't have that, it is emanuel39@comcast.net. There are also some of the handouts from last week on the spiritual disciplines. If you didn't get that, Phyllis is also going to email sometime either today or tomorrow the full document that's got the links in it to the different spiritual practices and things. I didn't get that over to her last week to get mailed out this past week, so you can look to that. I want to bring our attention and focus now to the ministry that we are going to participate in this morning. Or I guess it's this afternoon, isn't it? I stayed after, and several of you stayed after church today and saw President Vesey's video. I was really touched by that. I thought what he had to say in there was really, really good. He was talking about the importance of ministry today and how there are so many people who are transitioning away from traditional Christian services and religion and so forth, and doing more individual spiritual practices, and that COVID had kind of accelerated that, but also the importance of us gathering together and being part of the community and supporting each other. And that how we as a church and as individuals, and especially in this setting today as priesthood, we need to be ready to pivot from how we have done things in the past and change how we're doing things to meet the needs of people today and where they are. I was really, that really touched me in a way. Because, Kevin and I have two young adults who prefer not to go to church. They say that they're more spiritual than they are religious. And as a mama, that kind of breaks my heart. But I can also see where they're coming from. So the other thing, at the end of all of our church services, we always end with the mission prayer. But I think for our our service today, I think it is important for us to start with the mission prayer, because we are asking God's Spirit, where will He lead us today? And in this setting, as we are looking for guidance and direction, and to see where we fit into that, I think it is very important for us. So, if you have this memorized, great. If not, follow along with me and pray with me. God, where will your Spirit lead today? Help me be fully awake and ready to respond. Grant me courage to risk something new and become a blessing of your love and peace. Amen. Thank you. So I am excited to introduce to you our guest speaker today, Amy Estep. She comes to us from the Mission Center. And I've only met her one other time previous to this, but Kevin has worked with her at the Mission Center. And spoke incredibly highly of her and thought that the ministry that she has to offer would be wonderful for our setting today. So I will introduce her. Amy is a high priest. She attends the Lee Summit congregation and was pastor there for 9 years before moving into her role at the Mission Center. She has had an in-home daycare for almost 14 years. And she says that it is much easier for her to facilitate young children than it is for adults. So I promise it'll be easy. We're all loving. And her son and daughter are both in college, and she loves baseball. Royals? Royals, there you go. So with that, I will pass it over to Amy Estep.
Thank you very much. It is wonderful to be here with you this morning, and she's not lying. I'm so much more comfortable with people who need me to cut up their chicken nuggets for them. But we'll give this a whirl and see how I do. So I wanted to start this morning with I did it too this afternoon. I don't stand up in front of a congregation in the afternoon with the dwelling in the Word. And so Doctrine and Covenants 163, 6a is the scripture that we're going to kind of sit with for just a couple of minutes. I will read it through a couple of times, and then we'll have a chance to kind of reflect on that scripture. Oh, look at me, I'm excited. Priesthood is a sacred covenant involving the highest form of stewardship of body, mind, spirit, and relationships. The priesthood shall be composed of people of humility and integrity who are willing to extend themselves in service for others and for the well-being of the faith community. As I read this passage again, I would encourage you to note any words or phrases or maybe images that capture your attention. Priesthood is a sacred covenant involving the highest form of stewardship of body, mind, spirit, and relationships. The priesthood shall be composed of people of humility and integrity who are willing to extend themselves in service for others and for the well-being of the faith community. Would anyone like to share if anything in that passage spoke to them? A phrase or a word that maybe you heard differently this time or that spoke to you?
Words that stood out to me, and every time I read this, they do, humility and integrity. That combination of things are amazing.
Wonderful. Humility and integrity in our roles as servant ministers. Thank you. In the back, was there a hand up? Would you like a microphone?
I like the phrase, willing to extend themselves, because to me, that's Jesus. That's what he did, and that's how he lived. So that's really strikes a chord with me, because that's my desire.
Extending ourselves outside of our comfort zones, stretching our gifts of ministry, being like Jesus. Thank you for sharing. Up here, Dana.
I like the word covenant because it says to me that you agreed. It's just like when you met a baptismal cousin, you said you were going to follow Christ, okay? And priesthood, you were going to serve forever. And we have a room full of empty seats and a lot of priesthood in this congregation.
Thank you for sharing. A couple more hands.
I liked stewardship of mind, or body, mind, spirit, and relationship, just the idea of the whole person, but in a way that is responsibly given.
I'll go along with that, but I would add highest form, meaning none higher.
Thank you so much. Are there any others who wish to share? I love how we covered almost the whole scripture. Is there someone online sharing or? No, okay. I love how we covered almost the whole scripture with how we sat and related that scripture to our own experiences. So what we are talking about today, the covenant principles for faithful priesthood ministry. I'm going to talk just a little bit about kind of how those came about and how they are intended to be used as priesthood members. And then I'll just kind of briefly go through each one. There are 9 of them. So kind of in my teacher mode, even though I'm not a teacher, kind of in that mode. And then I would like to, with this size group, I think we could all just stay together, and I'd like to open it up and hopefully have time to get through each one and have a chance to kind of share your own thoughts about each covenant. And I have a handout that I'll pass out as we get closer to that time that will have some challenging kind of prompts for you to use today and also to take with you as you delve into this and grow with this on your own. So priesthood members represent Community of Christ in their public ministry every single day, not just on Sundays when we're together. So in preaching and teaching and celebrating and using our sacraments and having those be part of our ministry, we proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ in responsible, consistent, and affirming ways. Community of Christ authorizes ordained ministers to represent the church. And I think that's very important to remember. We are representatives of Community of Christ. We have been trusted to follow and to promote the church's policies and procedures and beliefs. Ministry is enriched as we enrich ourselves, as we take the time to grow and develop our priesthood, whether we've been a priesthood person, a priesthood member for a week or a month or a year or a decade. We always have room to grow and to improve, and that enriches the ministry we have to offer. So before I go into the covenant principles, I want to be sure to uphold the fact that these are going to speak to each of us differently, much like our scripture passage did. We all have our own unique experiences and personality and things that we are bringing to the table. So we will all kind of react and absorb these differently. So I'm going to start out with the very first one. I need one extra hand up here today. So the first covenant principle is to engage in ongoing faith and spiritual practices to deepen my relationship with God and others through study and spiritual formation. Jesus' ministry was informed by what he knew. It was expressed through his doing, and it was given power by being. When we are being, we are called to be still and attentive. We are mindful of God's presence. It is the part of us that recognizes that we are meant to live in God's love, to share God's love. The second principle is to affirm and promote Christ's mission of invitation, compassionate ministries, and justice and peacemaking, helping prepare others for Christ's mission, and partnering with other priesthood in leading congregations in mission. So a growing sense of call can be experienced as a desire to engage even more fully in our ministry. So preparing people, using our priesthood to develop disciples to serve, is another way of being in relationship with others. And that is how we can be effective priesthood, when we are in relationship with others. The third covenant principle is to provide ministry consistent with the church's identity, mission, message, and beliefs. It's often referred to as IMMB. And these are found in the Sharing Community of Christ book and in other official church documents. We are accountable for communicating and upholding the church's beliefs. When the church's identity, mission, message, and beliefs are internalized and lived out by church members, the mission of the church, Christ's mission, moves forward. Our next covenant principle is to model an ethical, moral, and holistic lifestyle. When we live a moral life based on ethics, we live in a manner that models healthy ways of being. It's a very simple one if you think about it. When congregations live this way, live ways that model ethical behaviors and lifestyles, we create a powerful witness in the community, because living a moral life is about living responsibly in the world, not just in our small communities. The next covenant principle is to model generosity as a regular contributor to mission ties according to my true capacity. So this covenant principle points specifically to generosity in connection to our mission ties. But I want to uphold that this also includes being generous in our witness and our willingness to give ministry. Living generously is a spiritual practice. It's something that we can do, we can grow, we can develop, and we can sit with and model. Sorry. Protect the safety and well-being of children and youth, including, where applicable, being a registered child and youth worker. Where we live, everyone in this room should be a registered child and youth worker. We take the class one time, but that is not where our responsibility ends. Priesthood members have a stewardship to seek the welfare of the vulnerable, and this includes a special concern for our children and our youth. Knowing the names of children in the congregation, reaching out to them, having conversation, asking them about their days, about their school, about what's going on with them, building that relationship with them is a powerful and positive way to model our priesthood ministry to the younger people in our community. The seventh covenant principle is to actively participate in congregational life or similar church expressions. You're all here, so good job, you did this one. We're done, we can move on. When you are called to stand with your congregation. We are in congregations as servant ministers. We bring gifts to our congregations, we bring gifts to our mission center that increase the diversity that we have when we gather. It allows us to be with people in times of celebration, in times of need, everything in between. It allows us to create opportunities to prepare people for ministry, and it enriches the congregational experiences of the sacraments and of the time we spend together when we come with our priesthood in the forefront of our thoughts and our actions. When we are committed to ministering in our faith community, we create pathways for others to respond likewise. Participate annually in educational or spiritual formation experiences offered by the congregation, mission center, apostolic mission field, or world church. I feel like you did a second one. We're all here. We knocked out 2 of them just by being here today. Yay, us. Our church is amazing at providing resources. Our website is overflowing. I mean, it's almost overwhelming, all of the things that are out there to help us develop and grow in our discipleship and in our ministry. When we join in with classes or retreats or reunions or seminars or conferences, there are so many things that we can take away from those experiences. First of all, hopefully we are learning something. We have valuable learning experiences provided to us by our mission center and by our World Church. Another opportunity is just a chance to get away, to center ourselves in a different environment. Throughout the scriptures, Jesus takes time to kind of step back and regroup and center himself before offering ministry. And that is a chance that is offered to us when we go to reunions and retreats. It also gives us an opportunity to be with different people that we don't see all the time, to see the diverse gifts that are within our mission center, within our congregations. And it also gives us a chance to realize the gifts that we're bringing to the table. Hey, I didn't realize that this was something that not every congregation has, and I can offer this gift outside of my own congregation. And our last one, and you don't have to hear me talk for a while, is to develop and implement a plan for ministry that uses my gifts to advance Christ's mission. Lots of us who have been called to the priesthood in the past probably 10 or 15 years, maybe 20 years, have probably been given a chance to form a ministry plan. And if that is something that you have done, it's not one and done. It is an evolving plan that can be added to, should be revisited, should be built upon. And if you haven't done one, this would be a great time to think about what you would like your ministry plan to look like. It is important for us to have that ministry plan kind of ingrained in our priesthood responsibilities. And as we sit with that plan and we grow with that plan, it prepares us to be able to offer ministry when asked and planned for, but it also kind of becomes ingrained in our personalities and what we're doing, and when those opportunities arise that are completely unexpected, we are prepared to offer ministry. We are aware of what our gifts and our strengths are, and we are prepared to use them in that way. So those are our covenant principles. And what I would like to do now with the time that we have remaining is I'm going to work. I'm passing out these handouts. Thank you very much. And I'd just like us to stay in this large group. And we'll just kind of go through them one at a time. It has kind of the bullet points that I might have shared about each principle, but it also has a little more in detail explanation, and like I said, a little bullet point to kind of get us started. So I'll give us just a minute to get these passed out, and then we'll go back and look at the first one. I think is the first one on page 1. Page 1. If I was super good at this, I would have numbered them, but I didn't. So the first covenant principle is to engage in ongoing faith and spiritual practices to deepen my relationship with God and others through study and spiritual formation. And right below the kind of the explanation, which I've touched on earlier, is kind of a little bullet point and some challenges for us. So I'm going to go ahead and read this, and feel free to take notes on your paper, how it pertains to you, but this will be our chance to share with the larger group. Consider the actions and practices that renew your spirit and cause you to be aware more fully of God's presence. What can you do to experience these things more often? How can you arrange your schedule to honor your commitment to pursue personal spiritual practices? That's a lot of questions for one covenant principle. I will share that when the church made the daily bread available online, that is something that I made part of my morning routine. So I get my coffee, and I've got my games on my phone. But before I play my games on my phone, I take about 3 or 4 minutes to sit with whatever the daily bread scripture and messages for that day. And it helps me center myself, and that was not something that I was very good at taking the time to do daily before that opportunity was presented to me. And that is a change that I was able to make, where I can kind of just, even if it's just a few minutes each morning, kind of center myself and start my day that way. Are there others who wish to share?
I think along what you're referring to is habits. For better or worse, TV is a habit, watching TV or watching anything in regards to that, or our meals are habits. Whether we want to eat a meal or not, we still oftentimes do that. So I think as much as anything for me is just establishing in some way or another a consistent habit in trying to improve and increase your spirituality.
Thank you for sharing. Yes, it's a part of making it a habit. That is exactly right. There, in the back?
So I'm 89, and so a few years ago, I sought a new evangelist blessing for this time of my life. And I found that that was very stimulating in pointing out things that I could improve on and share and develop. Another thing, the writers, the publishers of Daily Bread are always looking for new writers. So that's one of the things I do, and so that's something I focus on in mornings often, is just trying to express thoughts for a Daily Bread.
Thank you. I love how your commitment and my commitment have crossed over. I have probably read some of the wonderful things that you have written. And I appreciate you sharing the importance of revisiting sacraments and looking at them in a new way. Thank you for sharing.
I just believe that one of the most basic ways is to develop a prayer life and a communication with the Spirit. And I attempt to do that every morning and evening. Sometimes I don't get it in twice a day, but that's real important to have a prayer life.
Thank you for sharing. That is important, and it sometimes is something that it's hard to make a priority in our daily activities. Thank you for sharing that.
One of the things that I've been trying to do is learning to appreciate silence. And it's hard sometimes because, I like background noise, and always have. But just to appreciate the silence. And I was inspired by my neighbor who lives right behind me. And when he first introduced himself, he said, "You will see me on the deck in the morning with my coffee." And truly our decks are just right across from each other. And he's out there every morning between about 8 and 9 o'clock. And he isn't doing anything. He's meditating for that whole time. He doesn't have his phone. He doesn't have his book. Later in the day, he will do that again with a book or a phone. And so I will sometimes go out there after he goes in and try and see what it is, gain some inspiration from his inspiration for me, what it is that can improve my life by sitting in the silence and just visiting with God.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And I love how you saw a routine everyday activity, but because of your willingness to be open to the Spirit, you use that as an opportunity to grow in your spirituality. So thank you for sharing.
When I read through the section of being asks us to be still and attentive, to be mindful of God's presence in the world around us, I think being can also take on more of a verb type of action. And I know some of the times in my life when it's hectic, a lot of time I'm taking on a lot of different roles, but one of my basic roles that I spend a lot of time at is being a physical therapist. So even in being a physical therapist, I'm thinking, how in my practice am I being? And there'll be times in my treatments where I will be providing like manual treatment or therapy on somebody, and then I'll think about, okay, how am I letting the Spirit move through me to be a presence for somebody else to bless them and to heal them? So I think even as we are participating in our regular roles during the day, we are being attentive to that Spirit, and we can let that Spirit move through us to make a difference.
Thank you for sharing. That is so true. The importance of letting the Spirit. I will start by sharing that if anybody asks me what makes my church different or why I like my church, I will say the mission initiatives or the enduring principles, and usually I just say both. But I think that we have a very unique gift that was given to us with these directives that help us stay focused as disciples and as priesthood members. Are there others who would like to share on this one? How do the mission initiatives inform how we approach our ministry? Thank you. Yes?
I remember after the mission initiatives came out, and I heard President Veazey talking, and he said, it's not like a pick and choose, like you don't just choose one and say, that's the one I'm going to do. It's about the holistic ministry, and I feel like this is what this covenant principle is talking about holistic ministry and how we do all of those things. So for me, it's a matter of sometimes reviewing those mission initiatives and thinking about the different ways that I can incorporate that into my life, all of them. And some of them are way harder than other ones. Like, I'd rather invite people to Christ was sort of crossed off the list, because that's like a really hard one to do, or feels like it's really hard. And I don't know if you all remember, but we did a gifts sort of analysis of priesthood in the congregation, and evangelism was one that only one person in our congregation chose as being one of their strengths. So it's hard, and I think that's why it's important to think about them all together and how important that is for our ministry to think about all of those different ones.
Thank you. They provide not only a framework, but an opportunity to be challenged. Thank you for sharing. I'm not seeing anyone else jumping up, so we will move on to the next one. So our third one is to provide ministry consistent with the church's IMMB, as expressed in sharing and community of Christ. How can you most effectively share the identity, mission, message, and beliefs of the church in your own life, in your own congregation, and with people outside of your congregation?
I have the great joy of having to answer any emails or phone calls that come into the world headquarters. And so it gives me a great opportunity to interact with all kinds of people that are asking questions and or asking for prayers or many different things. So it's a wonderful way that I can talk to them about what we are, what we do.
That sounds awesome. I want to do that. I bet you could. I'm on my path of becoming a lady of leisure, so as soon as I retire from in-home daycare, I might give you a call. I think that sounds neat. Are there any others who wish to share? Yes?
I think this one puts a lot of, not burden, but a lot of the responsibility on us to understand as priesthood what the church's identity, mission, message, and beliefs are. And I just wonder, like even for myself, if somebody were to ask me that question, if I could vocalize what that was, like in a concise way. And so I think it becomes partly on us to figure out what that means so that we can, when people ask, answer those questions or vocalize it in, like, I don't know, sharing in community Christ is something like 40 pages long. So like our 1-minute elevator speech, what would we say?
Mm-hmm. That's a wonderful challenge for us. How do we sum up why we love this church in a 1-minute elevator ride? And it would be different for all of us, and I think that's great. All right, we will move on. Model an ethical, moral, and holistic lifestyle. So our question for this one is to consider choices that help you live responsibly in the world. How can you make yourself more available to encountering the living Christ and living more holistically? How can you help others live more holistically?
You know, that word lifestyle and holistic lifestyle caused me to think of our stewardship over our whole lives and how we demonstrate that stewardship by the things that we do and say. I've felt very close to nature, and many times I sense God's presence when I'm out walking in nature, working the gardens, working on the lawn, or walking among our trees in our neighborhood. I just I feel very close to God, and that's part of my meditation too each day, that I try to connect with God through the beauty of nature. We see so many terrible things around us. I try not to watch the news anymore because 90% of the news is bad news and the terrible things going on in the world. I'd much rather focus on the beauty around us that God has created and taking care of that beauty. Taking care of nature, preserving what God has created for us. So I'm very conscientious about recycling and reusing things that can be reused. And I try to model that for my family, my children and grandchildren, both by what I do and also by, just verbal reminders, kind reminders that, how plastic kills the animals and pollutes the oceans and many other things. So, I think that stewardship over what God has provided for us is extremely important in our holistic ministry.
Thank you for sharing, appreciating that which God has given us, finding God in the beauty outside of this building in nature, and sharing that with others. Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, our next one. Model generosity as a regular contributor to mission ties according to your true capacity. How can you incorporate, or how have you incorporated into your life the principle of generosity as a spiritual practice? And again, I just want to uphold that while this speaks specifically to contributing to our mission ties, which of course is very important, I would just uphold that this principle can be applied to generosity in other areas of our ministry as well, our time and our talent and our testimony. I know for me, speaking specifically to mission ties, thank you, e-tithing, that made this so much easier to uphold this covenant principle. When this came out, I appreciated the phrase true capacity. For me, that opened a lot of conversations I was able to have with my children about the importance of giving and kind of how important it is to balance what we can give, both of our time. Teaching my daughter, it's okay to say no to participating in a service when you are overwhelmed with school. And then also having the conversation about what financially our true capacity really is and how we can give. And I would have never thought to have that conversation with my children without this prompt of that phrase. And so I appreciated that very much when that came up. And I said you weren't going to have to listen to me anymore, and here I go. Karina knew I was lying all along. We have a hand up over here.
This is well, many years ago when Tracy and I were married, there was a stretch where she had a part-time job, but it wasn't providing much, and my full-time job really wasn't enough. And I remember we were struggling financially, and we were going at least $500 in the hole every month. And I remember talking to God about how am I supposed to give when I can't even pay my bills? And God reminded me that my time and my talents and what I gave didn't have to be financial. And even to this day, that's one of the things that is most important to me, is recognizing that my gifts and what I give back is so much more than just the financial part of it. You know, he's blessed me so that I'm able to give now, but there's that time and that talent and that physical ability that he's given me to do things, and that's part of my ministry, I believe.
Thank you so much for sharing that personal testimony about how your giving and your priesthood have lined up.
One of the things that I have found recently in my life is also with that, according to my true capacity. And it's not, I find that once you're retired, everyone thinks that you have all this time and energy to do all kinds of things, and eventually you say, what is my true capacity? At what point am I being a better steward by saying, I can't do this, I'm doing this, or I can do this. And recently I turned down an opportunity even within my homeowners association where they had a project they wanted me to take on. It was, and they said, you can do this. You've got all these skills. You can do this. We need you. We need you. And I debated a long time, and finally I said, it's not a situation where I can't do it. I know I could do it. But I've already made my obligation of my time to my church family. And I'm involved in a lot of things there. And there are a lot of people in the community that could do this job, but not so many that can do the job that I'm doing with my congregation. And I felt like, for me, that was the way I was becoming a better model and saying, I want to do one thing really well and not two things mediocre.
Thank you for sharing. That was a wonderful example of recognizing our true capacity. It's okay to say no if it's going to affect how well we can do other things we've committed to. All right. Protect the safety and well-being of children and youth and being a registered youth worker. So the two questions for this are, how can you confront issues that threaten the well-being of children and youth in your community? And how can you be a servant, a friend, and a minister to children, youth, and their families?
Amy, one of the things that I have struggled with this principle is, you said earlier in your presentation, it's a one and done training. And I just really struggle with that and feel like we need to be implementing like a recertification program every maybe even 5 years, just to keep in the forefront of our mind what it is that we need to be doing to protect our children.
Yes, thank you for sharing. That has been expressed in other areas of the Mission Center, the importance of that. And I would just throw out there that even if you already have it, when Tyler offers the class, especially as we get into camping season, you are welcome to take it again to kind of revisit the importance of what's taught in that curriculum. But I don't disagree that, and as things change in our, it's nice to kind of get a refresher and maybe even with some updated information. Thank you for sharing.
As many of you know, we have implemented what we call Too Deep Leadership, which was borrowed from the Boy Scouts. So we have been very much encouraging all of you to participate in our youth program, because if you don't participate in our youth program, we can't get Too Deep Leadership. We don't have enough people. So when we ask you sometimes to participate or to be a second set of eyes, that's about protecting our adults, but also protecting our youth. So continue to say yes.
This is a little different way of looking at it, too. I protect children by, when I go to vote, I vote for things that are for children, especially in the future. It's beyond us, many things that we go and vote for. How will it affect the children in the future? And if it's detriment, I won't vote for it.
Thank you. What a neat way to look at this, especially as members of the priesthood. Not only how can we protect and help the children that we are interacting with right now, but what can we do that protects children that we haven't even met? Right here.
I'll just follow up on that comment. In the upcoming November election, there's going to be a vote on the Children's Youth Services. It's I can't remember. It's for Jackson County, and increase. I don't think it's it is an actually increase in our levy. And I serve, as you know, I serve on the Community Services League Board of Directors, and we're endorsing this. And so there'll be more publicity coming out in the next few weeks on this, but I encourage everybody to vote for it.
Thank you. We have a responsibility as priesthood members and also just as humans to make ourselves aware of the opportunities that we have to protect children and be informed. Thank you.
I'm going to tell you about stuff that I've done, and I don't mean this. This isn't a bragging thing. This is a blessing to me that I've been allowed to do this. But after retiring from the fire department, many of you know that I substitute taught for 10 years or more in the elementary. And when I retired from that, the teachers not only gave me a party, but they all knew I loved to fish. And so from the first grade through the sixth grade, they all wrote out a memory or thank you of me on a carved out fish. And they had the first grade hook on the stringer, the second grade hook on the stringer. And it was a blessing to me for the effect I'd had on their lives. Also, the Lord blessed me and let me work for the Nature Center up here, Burr Oak Woods, for some 23 years. And we worked basically with children. We worked many times with adults too, but basically with children. And we could get into a big discussion on how I believe that teaching a kid to fish is a blessing to the child, because it's a gift you can give them that will last their lifetime. You can teach them how to play football. There will come a time when they can't play football. Play baseball, they can't play baseball. But they can always sit on a pond and fish, even if it's in a wheelchair. So there's many, many ways to bless a child. And the Lord has blessed me to allow me to do that.
Thank you. And I love what you shared at the beginning, especially with children, I find, but in all options in our ministries, we are often so many times the recipient of blessings when we are intending to be the giver. And that's just kind of how our priesthood ministry works sometimes. It comes full circle and blesses us too.
Just want to note that the Peace Pavilion, which is going to be formally grand opening on the 11th of November, we have all of our docents are required to take the Registered Church Children and Youth Worker course because we feel like it is a good example, and it helps us legally to have done something to prepare our folks. And because we are not a nonprofit, you know, the church's influence is now moving through this new group of people. Hopefully we'll get people from the community who will experience this same training. So I think it's a good example that the church is setting for the community.
Thank you for sharing. We do have a responsibility to set a good example and model that good behavior. Thank you.
I'm going to embarrass myself a little. Jim taught me how to put a worm on a hook, and I realized I've been doing it wrong my whole life. Anyway, I work with Girl Scouts, and we need to think of our teenagers, because through this COVID, I've seen a couple of my girls have to go into the hospital for mental issues. And for me, it's about being there to listen to that teen. And not that it has to be shameful or anything, you just need to let them know that reaching out for help is bravery. So it's been an honor to do that, and just to toot my daughter's horn, is she's been right along there with me through all that. And all my Girl Scouts seem to support each other, and that's because of learning through churches and through all of us adults.
Thank you. All right. Actively participate in congregational life or similar church expressions. Consider your gifts, the office to which you are called, and the needs in people's lives. How can you best stand with your congregation? With whom could you partner to promote the holistic ministry of Jesus Christ in your congregation or community? Right over here.
Mine is kind of more of a question. Because of COVID and everything that's happened, and we're talking about our youth and how they're, those of us that were able to stay after church and watch President Vesey's presentation, I guess that's my challenge, and the challenge to all of us is, how do we reach our youth knowing that, well, I saw it even back in Hannah, long before COVID, when Hannah was a teenager. I noticed that they just saw things a little differently. All the pomp and circumstance of church and all that, they didn't have any use for. But when it came to justice, and her best friend lived up the street, and he came out as a young teenager, and he was scared to death that his dad wouldn't accept him. And I remember sitting there having that conversation as he was in tears in his eyes, and just looking over at him and telling him, you will always have a place to live. You never have to worry. You will always be welcome in our home. And I guess my point was, Hannah back then, and our youth see it. They get it. And the question is, do we get it? And how do we express to them and communicate that we are loving, accepting, and that we want to share life with them in such a way that it ministers to them so they can see Jesus through us? I guess is the question. And I don't think the way that, a lot of times the way that we've been doing it or the way that we have done it necessarily works with them nowadays. And I experienced that, years ago with her, is that, we've got to figure it out. It's too important.
Thank you for sharing the importance of being open to new expressions of ministry. Reframing how we have always looked at and done things is an important part of our priesthood. Just have two more. Participate annually in educational or spiritual formation experiences. And the question for this one is, what specific steps will you take in your commitment to ongoing education and spiritual formation? This one's kind of pretty personal, setting a goal for yourself. How would you make that commitment to yourself to participate in ongoing educational and spiritual formation? But anyone that would like to share is, of course, welcome to.
I'll just share real quick. I am the committee lead for the priesthood development part of David Loy and Mindy's portion of the congregational pastoral line. And I just feel that ongoing education and learning about things that are going to continually improve our ministry and open us to new opportunities. We are looking for, when you fill out your survey on these classes, ideas that we can continue to have these classes and ministry opportunities and education opportunities for us in the priesthood and the congregation.
Taking the time to be sure that what you're offering is what's needed and what will help people the most is a wonderful way to make that commitment. Thank you for sharing. And
Well, off of what Dana just said too, is I'm really pleased with how we have stepped up to take the responsibility to participate in things. And Amy, today I've learned quite a bit actually, so I think this is a huge educational opportunity for us to kind of reform, restructure, hear what the ideas and where everybody's at kind of in our priesthood to be able to meet some of the challenges we have. So I think just this and our committee and forming this and doing this has been a great success and a great help to all of us. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Attending the ministries and the classes that are offered is an important part. I appreciate you all being here. And our last one is about our own personal plan for ministry. And our question is, who would you invite to mentor or partner with in your plan of ministry? This one just kind of challenges us to think about who helped us on this journey of priesthood. Who do we look up to and admire as other priesthood members? And who would we ask to help us kind of mentor as, or on the opposite side of that, have we been asked to mentor, and how can we have that be part of our ministry?
Well, I was asked to mentor, to preside, a lady who hadn't presided for our church before and new to the congregation. And so I was asked to work with her. And from that, we've learned that we need to get our act together a little better on where to find stuff. And we've talked about that in the worship commission. We're not a commission, committee, whatever we are. It was, because I knew where to go find stuff, but good grief, she didn't. And so, you know, I think that's something we could work on, not just in the committee, but in the whole picture.
Thank you. On the last page, there are a couple of challenge prompts, and we are not going to discuss those in our larger group. Those are for you to take home and to sit with as you work on your plan and set your own goals as priesthood members. I told Corey there was no way we would go over today. Never in my life have I talked more than I've been asked to talk, so I apologize for just the few extra minutes I stole out of your afternoon. And I wanted to leave us, there we are, with some words of commitment. This is from the hymn, A Charge to Keep I Have. I'm not going to read this. Actually, can you guys read it? It's kind of small. It's also at 537 if you want to look at it in a hymnal. I'm just going to leave this up here as we kind of wrap up our time together, and I would just encourage you to kind of read those words and let them sit with you a little as we leave this space and move forward in our priesthood commitments. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate that. I want to talk just a little bit about next Sunday. We have been videoing the first two presentations, so you can go back and review those again if you desire, or if you know someone who wasn't able to participate in the first two. Our next session, next Sunday, we're actually going to break out into two smaller groups. We're going to have the Melchizedek priesthood in one group, being led by Dave Byrne. He's going to kind of facilitate some discussion and have, questions for us to talk and figure out how we can better minister as Melchizedek priesthood. And then the Aaronic priesthood are going to be in a group together under the direction of Garland Land, doing similar activities. It's going to be much more difficult for us to video those sessions since they're more active participation. And so I just encourage everybody to come and attend in person for that one. And so with that, I will let you go, and thank you for coming today, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.